All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Q2 webinar, the 90-10 rule, why your MQA transformation will fail. As you may have heard or seen on LinkedIn from the likes of John Miller, Carrie Cunningham, and a whole host of other marketing thought leaders, the MQL should no longer be the guiding principle for marketers. And some would argue it probably never should have been. But now what, right? We've all trained our executive leadership teams, our boards, our marketing teams to focus on the MQL. So now what do we do? Well, we at Inverta have tackled that question with a number of our clients, including today's honored guest from PagerDuty, who put together and we put together a comprehensive toolkit to arm you to make that transition within your organization. If you haven't seen it, we will send you a link in our follow-up. But suffice it to say, the reason the MQL isn't sufficient is that it doesn't take into account buying committees, and it doesn't take into account all of the signals that can be observed from that account: first party, third party intent, second party data, and more. So with that, that's about enough for me as a preamble here. So until we get to the Q&A, I'll come back on. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy and David. Kathy, who is the VP of Innovation and co-founder of Inverta, and Dave Sue, who is the VP of Marketing, Technology, and Operations from PagerDuty. So Dave, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and welcome everyone. Thanks for your time. I'm so happy to be here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, MQAs, with one of my favorite people, Kathy Macchi from Inverta. Before I dive in, I want to give a little bit of context around PagerDuty itself. So, PagerDuty is the market leader in operations cloud solutions. We utilize generative AI and enterprise-grade automation to ensure that our customers' most mission-critical applications remain resilient and reliable 24/7. So I want to start by talking a little bit about what is going on with PagerDuty 2025. And I think a lot of these things are similar to what other SaaS software companies are facing. Biggest thing, growth and earnings and profitability. So in the marketplace today, there is a more of a premium on companies that are profitable. This previous mantra of growth at all costs is really slowing down unless you're an AI firm. And with more pressure on profits and better margins comes a different tenor in the company, and we're facing that. And I think a lot of companies are also facing this as well. So our growth as a company was up in the 30s. We're a PLG company, so much growth, money hand over fist, and nowadays it's about half. So the pressure on the margins on a quarterly basis is really impacting the way that the company is operating overall on a quarterly basis. When we dive deeper into the areas that we have ownership over and the go-to-market team really pays attention to, we're looking at opportunity conversion rates really slowing down, dropping in conversion rates. And a lot of this is because deal cycles are taking a lot longer. PagerDuty is trying to grow its enterprise segment business quite a bit. So that's impacting the length of deal cycles. And that impacts our conversion rates. Things keep getting pushed out. But we're also seeing deal cycles take longer for smaller companies as well. There's just a lot more scrutiny. So what this means is that there's a lot of transformation efforts going on in our company. CFO is saying, oh, you got to do zero-based budgeting. You cannot spend unless we approve. CIO is coming in and saying, you cannot buy new tools. We have to approve all the new tools. Here's a new process. So lots of new process changes, lots of governance structure. So when this happens, as an operations professional, as an operations team, we don't sit, we can't just sit here and watch this thing happen. There are things that we can do. And when my team and I started digging into this, started talking to our peers, started talking to our trusted experts like Kathy, industry analysts as well. And what we learned is that there's a lot of momentum around this concept of a marketing qualified account. It's helping drive better conversion rates. It's helping to increase deal sizes. So what is an MQA? Let's go to the next slide, Kathy. So All of our systems today at PagerDuty, I think for a lot of people out there, is really based on the individual. It's designed around qualifying a person as they come in, fill out a form, we look at them. If they're qualified, if they do a lot of engagement, we pass it to sales, and then sales will call this person. So it's a person-based system. What an MQA is, marketing qualified account, is that we're looking at the collection of the people at the account. What are they doing? Are they the right people? Are they actually engaging? And instead of passing an individual person, we're passing to sales a qualified account. And a lot of this is a big transformation. It is totally different. And if you can go to the next slide, we'll talk about like this journey. So the difference when you look at people, process, technology, kind of have it backwards. Tools, process, people. When you look at these three areas, when we're trying to drive this transformation to look at things at an account level, man, this is a tough sled because everything is really designed for the person-based model of demand generation. Starting on the left, our systems and tools, we use Salesforce, Marketo. They are really designed for people-based transactions. They are not doing us any favors in the tools to help us look at accounts and qualify accounts at a broader scale. PagerDuty grew up as a PLG-driven company, so driving people to trials was really the main way that we converted people to winning customers, to closed-won customers. So a lot of the systems were designed to support that transaction. And the processes, so when we look at the process, as I mentioned, this company was designed to drive PLG transactions, and the drive to trials was really inherent, not only in the systems, but also in everything that passed from marketing to sales. When we look at the hygiene of Salesforce opportunities, we were lucky. We are lucky if we have one contact on there. So this concept of looking at attribution and being able to track how many people were involved is just not there. And we have to really dig hard to find more information around that. So as we start to drive more enterprise transactions, we start to build these layers of sales-led growth processes on top of a PLG-oriented process, and that creates a lot of tech debt. So going back to the left, the governance of how we have Salesforce structured our data was just not really stringent, and the tech debt is really starting to balloon. The most difficult thing around this is the people. So all of our teams really grew up from an MQL-based process demand gen perspective. The great thing is PagerDuty has this culture of moving fast, iterate, let's go execute. That also created a lot of tech debt on the left side as well. The good news is we did launch a ABM pilot with sales and marketing last year, and we saw a lot of great traction. This was a big change for the teams overall, and especially for sales to work more closely with marketing, to look at an account-based perspective of engagement. Are they in market? Who's working on who's engaging? Who's not engaging? The problem with that is when you have sales attrition and those people that walk out the door, you lose that inherent collaboration and you kind of have to start over. So when we started talking about MQAs at PagerDuty, this concept of a buying group was really hard for people to understand. A lot of the people that were in the ABM pilot have since gone, so we have to start again from ground zero. So this concept of buying group also over the head of people like in the CIO group who's going to help drive these types of changes for us. So this is the basis of where PagerDuty is really starting our journey to MQAs. We are not there yet. We're in the middle of it. And Kathy is going to introduce a framework, which we're working with her on, to drive this change within the organization. As she does so, I will chime in with different examples of some of the things that we're currently doing. So Kathy, take it away. That's too much talking for me.
No, it's great talking to you, and I'll try to mimic your enthusiasm for this. So that was really good. Um, So what we've found is we've gone through these projects with a number of clients. And what I've seen is there's 4 stages you have to go through that, and this is going to outline basically how you can be successful with this, because it's not just a process change. This is how do you transform cross-functionally how your teams work together. At a high level, the first is what I used to just have a philosophical one, and then I backed up. In fact, Dave, here's where we are now, pre-philosophical. Sounds really fancy, but basically you have to prove the case for change. Like, how do I go in, validate, like, this is not my opinion. Here's why we're going to make this change. And I'm going to get into each one of these in more detail. The second one is once you've done that, you've sort of rallied people around, like, understand why we want to change. Then it's like, how am I going to work differently? How am I going to behave differently? Like, do we all have all the right definitions in place? Do we all agree how we're going to work together? Things like that. Once you have those two, you've got the data, you've proved it. People know, okay, this is what we're going to do. Here's why we're going to do it. Here's how. Then it gets into a pilot. Like, this is where the rubber meets the road. What does that look like? And all the details to get a successful pilot. And the last one is then nothing changes unless you have shared metrics and goals. Otherwise, you're basically, if you measured the same way, nothing's going to change. And so what we found going through these 4 alignment phases really makes a difference to success at the end. We've seen too many projects where people start out, they look at it strictly from, oh, I just need to get MQAs, get a definition, learn how to surface them in Salesforce. And they just fall flat because people haven't made the internal mindset change to how I need to work differently. So if I go through, and Dave, this is where we started. In fact, this was probably almost 2 months of going through all your data. And what you have to do is get everyone on board. Like, it may make sense to you, but you're in this every day. The rest of your organization isn't. And so they may agree at a high level. Yeah, I've seen the research as buying groups, but they haven't really internalized it yet. And you've got to build that compelling case for them. And the 2 ways I have people do it is look at all your single threaded deals, opportunities, and look at your multi threaded deals. And do you see an increased win rate? Do you see higher deal values? Do you see things closing faster? Really get that data that you can go to teams with and say, hey, this is not just what I want to do. With our own data, and this is what makes the difference. It's not just, industry data. In our own data, we find when we have multi-threaded deals, we have multiple people in opportunity, we actually win them. They have higher deal values, whatever that ends up being. The other thing that people do at the same time is look at all your opportunities, and sales reps, because it's been, I'm never going to put all the people on opportunity they dealt with. It just is, you can't have a process where it requires people manually doing something. So what we do is we went back and looked and said, for any response, a response could be a website visit, a form fill, an attendance at a webinar, anything. And so I look at how many responses did it take to get an opportunity? I look at that as almost, I think Forrester calls it engagement sufficiency. Like, and what we found consistently is the more responses you have, the more likely you have an opportunity and the higher the value. What I call that, it's like, well, duh. Most people say, well, that's obvious. And I just call it an early warning system. Like, if you have some accounts that have no responses or very low responses, just assume they're probably not going to close this quarter. And it just gives you a good guideline to say, as we get more responses, that's going to go up. And it's marketing's job to really start to drive more responses at an account. And this is where it comes down to you've got to have the numbers behind getting people on board. And Dave, I know you've gone through this exercise also.
Yeah, this was critical. And I want to do a shout out to Kerry Davis on my team that dove into this with you. We were able to surface live examples of opportunities that showcased all the different people and the different touch points that they had, and also which ones were MQLs and which ones weren't. And it was critical to telling the story about a closed won deal that was really successful and all the different people that engaged. And then we also did a lot of kind of more general analysis around the number of people engaging and how that impacted both conversion rates and deal values. And it was a compelling set of data that was surfaced, and it helped drive a lot of the philosophical change within the company and the
Yeah.
leadership.
We just did one where single threaded deals had a 3% win. And that's sort of what caught everyone's attention. And we actually had to break it out by region because first we did it just globally. And then one of the reasons like, well, that's not our data. So we find you have to get down to that level for people to really get the buy-in. And that's what now step one. It's like, okay, I understand why we're doing this. So then it's like, what are those definitions? Like, how am I going to get shared definitions with people, and how do I get people to work differently? And this is what I call sort of laying the groundwork. So, like, to me, there's three teams. There's a lot of times, and there's three or four, depending on your count. There's marketing, there's BDRs, there's sales, and sometimes there's even customer success on this, depending how this goes along. And do they truly see themselves as one unified team? And this is really a hard thing, because if till they see themselves as one team, you'll still have I got my goal, here's the right number of MQAs I sent over. Like, they need to see it as a joint proposition, and how do we all drive that revenue? Is there agreement on new ways of working? So does marketing need to say, like, hey, here's our target account list. My goal now is to drive as much engagement at that account as I can until I get it to an MQA. And what am I doing post MQA? And if that's the case, how are the things I need to do different? What are those things I need to do? Is there a shared understanding what an MQA is? A lot of times marketing has their definition and sales has a different one. So make sure everyone agrees and has buy-in, and this is what we're calling a marketing qualified account. Do they really understand buying groups? Like, they may, but have you actually gone through and said, like on the next one, who's the champion? Who's a blocker? Who's the influencer? And are we getting all those people on the opportunity? Is that marketing's role? Is that the BDR role? Is that sales informing them, like, this is what the committee is? But you need to have enough of those people on that opportunity for it to actually move forward. And are people really ready to leave what I call the volume-based thinking behind? Like, I'm going to get less, quote, leads. And am I really comfortable when I didn't get enough leads? And am I comfortable that, what does that mean for BDR if he gets an MQA? And a lot of times BDRs, they're in their 20s, they're right out of school. Like, you can't expect them to know, like, do you have playbooks for them? What are they supposed to do with an MQA? And so I think this part is really important. This is the cultural shift. Again, we haven't got to process. This is, do people see themselves working differently, and are they committed to it? Dave, what have you seen in your organization?
Yeah, we're facing this right now. I think the volume-based thinking is uh, really strong in terms of, how people think about qualification. It's like it's a numbers game, right? The
Yeah.
more volume you have, the higher success rate. I think that the definition of MQA is really salient to how you define attribution, or even how you define an MQL. Like, none of this stuff will really work unless you have an alignment around the fundamental definitions of how you're going to track this and the roles and responsibilities around it. So I think this partnership, especially between marketing and sales, is so critical, and it is a big philosophical alignment, which is the perfect word, I think, that you have on here.
Yeah. And what I think about this is, the goal here is not necessarily the answer. This is to really expose friction. Because if you really start asking these questions, that's when you find out where this disconnects. It's really easy to say, yeah, Dave, put in the MQA. But if you want to get the friction, you want to get people voicing, like, well, what does that really mean for me? You want me to do what when I get an MQA? That's what this stage is all about, just laying the groundwork. Which then tees up the next stage, is operational. Like, now that we've got everyone on board, we have our definitions. How do you make this come to life? And to me, the first thing is a pilot. Do not go to organizational rollout immediately. Do a pilot. Like, we all have our theories, but now what does this really look like in real life? This is where you don't need to have everything automated yet, but you want to say, like, is the pilot 90 days? How are we going to evaluate that? Who's what accounts are on it? What BDR? Like, what's the goal of the pilot? And then how are you going to surface those MQAs? It's like I said, you said, Dave, Marketo and Salesforce really don't do that for you. So how are you going to do that? You may not need to automate it, but does that BDRs know where to find an MQA? What do they do with it? How do they get additional contacts on that? For marketing, if you're having BDRs reach out to 3 to 4 people now, do you have role-based messaging? Do you have content for them? Like, what do you expect them to do? How does that work? And really making sure that you're meeting with those BDRs like at least once a week, because you want to get their feedback. Like, they're the basically feet on the street for you. Like, this is not working. This is where I find it. This is what really going to get for you the learnings you need so you can actually refine and scale with confidence. But again, operationally, Dave, this is where the ops team comes in. What's the manual process for getting that in? Who's going to train those BDRs so they know what to do? And like I said, having those check-ins and yet everything documented. This is where the MQA comes to life. This is your learnings. This is where you learn to refine. When you come out of it, you can scale with some confidence. And to me, this is your proof of impact. This is really saying we've gone from theory now. This is the impact, and you have a blueprint for how to scale this.
Yeah. And this is where we're talking to our peers that are embarking on this quite a bit as well and learning from them. So this is the stage we're at with PagerDuty. We actually thought about 5 different teams within PagerDuty that we can potentially pilot with. And each one of these teams had different components to them, like really good sales marketing partnership in this one team. This other team had a lot of volume, but for each one of them, there was positives and negatives that we thought through around the pilot. So I think selecting the right team is critical. And then the process of actually piloting this and making it come to life in the systems, it's going to be a very manual process for us during the pilot because we don't want to scale or change things in the system until we actually figure out what this process is going to look like. Whether or not it actually works, I don't know. But yeah, the pilot is definitely key and it's something that we're embarking on now.
Yeah, and I don't recommend automating anything until you go through the whole process. You'll get a lot of feedback from your BDRs about what works and what doesn't. So yeah, don't take that work on. But then when you are ready for your organizational rollout, to me, this is where you really get down to brass tacks. Like you had our idea of an MQA. Is that the same definition? And have you really defined that buying committee? And how are you going to surface those? Like how are those seen in the system? How can someone do all that? Then I think a lot of this next one falls on marketing. I think marketing really rallies a lot behind this whole MQA transition, but I'm not sure all the teams have put in the work about what that means. So are you taking those signals? Are you matching them to, hey, if there's this type of signal, maybe the digital team jumps in. And what type of content do they have? Like, can you map those signals to different actions and to different content? Where does the field fit in? Does the field just deal with post MQAs? What about the campaigns or growth team? So I think really understanding their role in this process and how they need to work different is going to be important. Obviously, from the BDR feedback, how are you going to redesign? Do you have a playbook? How do they surface MQAs? Do they have the right offers? What are their SLAs? When they do you get to disqualify an MQA? And if you do, what happens to all the people on that? Like, there's just a lot of process stuff that has to happen that we just haven't had. Are there new fields you need in Salesforce so they can disposition an MQA? Again, outlining marketing's role and what does success look like for them now that it's not an MQL. There's a lot on the ops side. Are all your systems in place, your processes, your workflows? Like, what does that all look like? Do you have demand-based or 6sense set up right? How does Marketo play in? How do your intent tools play in? And I think a part that people miss a lot is this is really messing a lot of change, and people underestimate how long it really takes for people to make that total shift over. Like they're going to naturally go back to what they're comfortable with, and having executive leadership there being loud, being vocal, and giving people enough time to iterate, learn, feel comfortable, be able to give feedback still to the process, I think is really important. The change management part is huge. Otherwise, people are just going to slowly creep back to how they did things because it's more comfortable. Dave, any thoughts around this? You've done other rollouts, so I know this is not foreign to you, just on this particular project, though.
The only comment on this is a lot of work and it stresses me out.
I don't think you're supposed to tell people that, Dave.
But I think that's the reality. I've seen so many people just think, just your point, I've seen so many people think it really is just number 5. Like I just need to update demand-based, 6sense, Salesforce, and it all works. And that's work, but it's the least, that's like the 10 or 20%. The other part is the 80%. How are people going to work different? How are you going to reinforce that new working behavior? How are you going to measure it? How are people going to get measured on their role now? I just had a conversation this morning about that, where Like the digital team's like, well, I was always measured on bringing in leads. Like, what does that look like now? And I can't target always at the at the account level. So there's just a lot of messiness to work through. And I think if you give involving people in the process to say, digital team, this is where we want to go to. What would you recommend for your own metrics? Like, how could you change your job to really support this? I feel you get a much better embracing of what's happening, other than from above, we're going to MQAs and here are your new metrics. Like the more you can involve the team in how that change is going to affect them and how they want to do the change, I think the better. Because what does come up last, and if you don't have this, it's not just about measuring performance. You have to have shared goals and metrics because that is what changes behavior. That drives the behavior change. So if no one changes the metrics and marketing still comped on volume and sales are still comped on opportunities, this will unravel within 60 days. Everyone goes back to their own camps. And so I think the things you need to align on is what is like, are you comp now? The metrics you're saying, what is our MQA volume and what is the quality? Quality meaning, are they converting to pipeline? You know, do we have the right MQA definition? Are we engaging enough with the buyer group? Do we find out that we have four? There's an exponential jump in our opportunity value, in our win rate, the deal value. Like, are you seeing that? Getting feedback from the BDRs. Are they being effective now when they follow up on things? Are they dispositioning, accounts? What does that look like for them? But as you do that, I think you have to decide on, Dave, you talked about even attribution. How you define all these metrics is going to be important, or no one has any faith in them. Where are you pulling that data from? Is it demand-based, Sixth Sense, Marketo, Salesforce? Is it one of your intent tools? How are you setting your planning and meeting cadence? Like, does sales and marketing, the BDRs get together every 2 weeks? And they're going over this and where you want to get to if they have a shared goal. Our MQA volume is not what it needs to be. How does sales and marketing work together to get that up? What are the things each team can be doing? And that starts to create accountability. Until you have that piece, this is sort of at the end, if you don't get to this, it will unravel. Like people have to have the shared goals and metrics.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think this is the key to everything and really driving the alignment, the philosophical alignment that you started off with is landing
Yeah.
on these.
This is landing on it. And there may be other metrics you want to track. Like I talked about, Forza has one about engagement sufficiency. I find website traffic is a real driver. It's anonymous, but if that's part of your buying engagement, like really looking at some of those things. This may not be the only, but these are the key ones we found that work best. Oops. And then what we get to is when we talked about change is hard. I'm going to stop in the top right-hand corner. Marketing has to think of themselves as full funnel marketing now. It's not just getting to an MQL. And this has implications for the digital, the field, the growth, the content team. Like for content, what content do I need to create now? For digital team, how do I target always at the account level? I can't, but what does that mean for me? For the field, am I just post MQA now? Or are there other things I'm doing? This really changes the content I create, what team activates it, what are those signals, who owns it, and how am I being measured? The BDRs, it's a whole new ball game for them also. Like, what's the goal of an MQA outreach? Do I have to find at least 3 people? Do I do outreach to them? Do I have the right materials? How do I engage them? How do I disqualify an MQA, or how do I promote an MQA to an opportunity? If I get an MQL, where does that fit in? What we found is a lot of times we get marketing BDRs, but sales is still not 100% on board. And they start to direct the BDRs not to be doing the stuff we just went through. So making sure, and you get a lot from sales. Sales knows the buying committee. They just have never told us, but they deal with those folks. They just haven't entered it in Salesforce. So what does an acquisition MQA maybe look like than a MQA? Am I giving clarity to the BDRs about here's the buying committee, here's what we need to do? And the last one is we have trained leadership on the whole funnel, MQL metrics, and that's not going to change overnight. So do you have new metrics? Are there 2 funnels now? So you can see your MQLs, but they also can see MQA. And is it over a year that you're phasing one out? A lot of your budget is based on MQLs. So how do you have new budget planning to go along with these new metrics? So I just think there's a lot there for each team that has to change. And having it all happen at once is a lot of disruption for an organization. How you manage that makes all the difference.
Yeah, the thing that I'll add here is as we look at this circle, we are also thinking about the narrative and the storyline for each one of these groups, and they're very different. So the what's in it for them for marketing is very different than what's in it for the BDR and sales. But in general, we're trying to impact those things I started off with, conversion rates, growth, right? So ultimately, that's like the overarching goal. But having said that, the way that we sell this idea and drive this change within these different groups, it's a different storyboard that we're working towards for each one.
And Dave, I really like that. When I started working with you, you had the CIO, the CMO, the marketing team, the sales op. You're building a different, like what's in it for them, for each one of them.
Mm.
But I think that's important how you're addressing it because otherwise it's seen as a marketing initiative. And this is really a company-wide initiative. And it is just getting aligned with how buyers buy now. Like that is the reality. And you're just getting everyone on board with what how buyers will interact. If we're going to change, like you said, almost every company we work with, growth is down, conversion rates are down, sales cycles are getting longer. It's a slog. And this is a real fundamental way to adjust that to maybe get those back on the upswing again. So with that, Jess, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Very good. Well, thank you both, Dave and Kathy. A lot of great insights. I'm sure you've left our audience with some swimming heads, hopefully inspired, hopefully not too scared, Dave. I mean, I'm just kidding. I mean, I think it's fair to make sure people know just how hard it is. Like it's going to take some work. But the work is worth it. And as I think I had in some
Yeah,
of the materials for this, like change is hard, but so is having the same conversation over and over and over again with your leadership as to why you're not hitting the metrics that they've already pegged you to. Right? That's
yep.
frustrating, it's demoralizing, it's bad for morale in a marketing team. So let's change the narrative, let's change the conversation, and that's what this transition does. So thank you both so much for your thoughts and insights. And you're not done yet. You're not off the hook because we've already gotten some really great questions. But I want to put it out there. If anybody has any additional questions for our panelists, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. But while you're thinking through what your questions might be, the last thing I wanted to share with you, and I will be sending you a link to this in the follow-up email. But this is our MQL to MQA toolkit. Kathy and our marketing ops team and some of our other consultants here at Inverta have put together a toolkit that talks about what are all the stages of alignment. How do you detox your sales team from their MQL obsession? How do you transition them over to MQAs, right? Then, one of our marketing ops practice leads, she wrote an article on, okay, what are all the systems requirements and considerations and those sorts of things. One of our questions, and I'll get to an answer on that shortly, we even talk about how do you think about compensation when you're looking at MQLs versus MQAs and those sorts of things. So there's a lot of great stuff in there. And last but not least is just a comprehensive checklist. Like here's, all the different phases and here's all the different things that you need to do along the way. So I will send a link out to that toolkit, which will also include a recording of this webinar. So feel free to share with your teams, right? Because as Dave has made clear, this is not a one-man show, right? Like this is an organization. It's not even just a marketing-wide initiative. It's kind of a company-wide initiative because it is a pretty major shift in the way everybody thinks about marketing and marketing's impact. All right.
I also want to bring up, Dave, this was a quote from your CMO when you went through it. And I think it's a really powerful statement that she made.
Yeah, we presented this to CMO, the leadership team for marketing to try to drive this philosophical change, step one. And this was her comment, like we're trying to drive more enterprise related deals, trying to move away from so much of the PLG motion. So her quote was, MQAs are not just a process change. This is a powerful framework, drive a philosophical shift driven by our business strategy, which is a great quote. She doesn't know I used this, so I didn't put her name on here.
But nobody has LinkedIn here, so they can't figure out. Just kidding. All right. Are you guys ready for some questions from our audience? Because we got a bunch of good ones.
Let's
Um,
go. Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. All right. So the first one I'm going to ask to Kathy because I think this is a question I've gotten from a lot of people because it's marketing qualified account. So everybody thinks account, they think account based. So I must be doing ABM if I'm going to switch to MQAs. So Kathy, talk a little bit about the difference between what ABM is and what an MQA is. Now, I know you're going to say, but they're not the same, but I've heard this
Yeah,
confusion before. Like if I'm not doing account-based marketing, do I need to switch to MQAs? I
that's a really good question. I've never thought about it in those
Yeah.
terms, but that is. No, you don't have to. So one, you could even do this, like I think a lot of small companies don't have an ABM motion, but this is more, in fact, I'm working with a company now, there's no ABM motion. And it really is just how buyers buy now. And you're just looking at a buying committee. ABM is a different layer on how you may want to do your campaigns to address that, which is fair, but they are separate things. What you need to be looking at though is for your campaign strategy, are you targeting all the all the buyers on the buying committee? And what are you doing to drive an account forward? So I think I'm not sure if I'm articulating that right, uh but they are
Yeah.
separate. Yeah.
They're separate. We actually had that question come up within our own company. And the way that I answer it is I think ABM is really focused on your execution around specific accounts, whether it's one to one to few. It's a handful of accounts that you're doing something different to drive engagement. And the concept of it is similar, but the MQA process is really doing this at scale. So regardless of those target accounts, you're looking at this for every single interaction that's coming in, commercial size accounts, large accounts, and it's not just the isolation of those specific target accounts where the campaigns are really designed to go execute against. So this is a broader scale.
That is
Cool.
a really good answer.
Yes. Perfect. And a real world one, not a, thought leader,
Yeah, that's
one, a
good,
real
Dave.
world example. All right. So the next question we have here, which is getting into something that we dug into when we were like, do we cover it during the session or do we wait until the Q&A? And I think waiting until the Q&A was the right answer because we got a lot of questions around so now what do we do with the MQL, right? And so a couple of questions have come in around the same topic. So one is, what do you do with hand raisers, right? In this new strategy, right? They typically come in as an MQL. I've seen clients that do high value MQLs, right? And so those are the hand raisers that say, contact me or whatever, those sorts of things. But then the other thing here is, do you keep artifacts like MQLs alive as you move to MQA? So, Kathy, I know you've had a lot of conversations
Yeah.
around this, but it's really what happens to the MQL now that you make this shift.
I think the MQL definition changes. So I don't see MQLs going away, especially for hand raises. It could be for trials, demos, contact me. Those still need to be handled immediately. And I think MQLs are one of those indicators. Like the difference is an MQL, like before we had points, might I get to 100 points. But now, if you're looking at MQAs, it may be three different people doing enough activity that will quote would have been 100 points that would make you an MQA. And so I think you can still pay attention to them, but if you get an MQL and there's no one else at the account engaging at all, what that should just tip off marketing is, hey, go engage other people. But I don't see them going away right now. I just see them changing in how we react to them.
Yeah.
Dave, what are you looking at? Because you're looking to implement this.
Yeah, we're going to keep an MQL process going, especially for those if they go to your web page and say contact sales, contact me, like yeah, we're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna pass those. So yet to be determined how this will play out for us during the pilot, but we did commit to saying, hey, these specific types of MQLs we will continue to pass. So we'll have to work through with the SDRs, BDRs, how that will work. Um, and then also, your point about, hey, there might be more, even though they might not reach this MQL threshold, the volume might not be impacted as much because you're looking at a lot of lower, scored or many other people involved, which may never MQL, but you're telling sales to go chase these accounts because they're showing the engagement. So that's an interesting way to look at it, and I think we're going to try to prove that out.
And I think part of it is giving the BDRs, like, what do they do when they have three people with like a little bit of engagement? Are they most likely influencers? And how do they work those to really get the full account on board? How do they start to build out that buying committee?
Well, Kathy, I think that actually gets right to the next question. Great tip.
Oh,
Thank you.
all
Which
right.
is around the buying committee, right? So we all say there's buying committee. It's this like mystical thing, entity out there, right? So Dave, I know you've also been going through this a lot, like figuring out what is your buying committee. Now, it's going to change from organization to organization, but how do you think about that? And then how do you operationalize that to your point, Kathy, around, okay, when an SDR has three names, okay, do they balance that against what the buying committee should be to help establish, are these people influencers? Are they going to be the economic buyer? Where do they sit, right? And those sorts of things. So Dave, I'm going to stop talking and Dave, let you kind of answer this question is, okay, how do you build that buying committee? And then how do you work with within your org to teach everybody on what to do with that information?
I will say first off that that definition is not gonna come from marketing operations by any means. This goes to the alignment and the agreement, looking at data and probably trial and error. I would say, I think for every company, this might look different what that buying committee looks like and who's composed of. Some might include procurement, some might not. Like we were just talking about this morning with a sales team. Um, so having said that, I think it's for us, it's going to be again a definition that we arrive at with our constituents, both marketing and sales, and then we're going to give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, we gotta go and iterate and try to improve and see, what are the right titles or who are the right people that are engaging that actually move the needle. So that's really part of the pilot to try this, understand which are the ones engaging, and then formalize it coming out of the pilot for something that's scalable.
And I
Awesome.
say this is where sales really, I think, has a lot of insight that they could share because they naturally deal with the buying committee. They just don't call it that. But they
Mhm.
know I got to get purchasing. This is the influencer. They naturally just do that. And how do we get that information? And I don't know if it's titles. Is it like in every company, a champion could be a different person, whether they're enterprise, commercial, SMB. So I think it's hard, but that's a lot of what your research is, what your BDRs tell you, what your sales reps tell you, what product marketing has learned, and trying to pull it all together. And I think it is trial and error.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and so one thing we've talked about here is around the MQA, and we've talked a lot about the buying committee, and it's multiple people within an organization. But one other component that contributes to MQA is that account even part of your ICP or not? Right? So we haven't really talked about that, and I know we've done other webinars on that, and that could once again be a whole webinar in and of itself. But one component that does make an account a qualified account is does it match your ICP or not? Right.
yeah.
And so, that's kind of another topic here. But one other question we have here is then, okay, great. So now you make this move. How do you now compensate your BDRs? Right? Because typically they're volume based and they have to hit a meeting quota, and that's how they get paid and those sorts of things. And so I actually wrote an article with our head of sales, and I worked with the gentleman who ran the SDR org for demand base for almost a decade. And we talked about, how do you compensate your BDRs to help shift this mindset, to help shift this behavior? Because as you said, Kathy, typically um, they're going to be employees that are pretty much straight out of college, right? So if you say, but it's good for the business if you only bring in accounts that match the ICP and our MQAs, they go, cool, but I got a number to hit and I've got rent to pay. So I'm just going to like churn out as many meetings as I can, right? So in playing into that, then compensate them more on accounts that match your ICP, that accounts that had hit the MQA stage, right? Because they are going to convert faster. They're more likely to convert, those sorts of things, right? So just compensate them greater. Give them 120% quota retirement for an MQA versus 100 or 75%, right? For accounts that haven't hit MQA yet, right? You start doing that, that's going to start going, oh, yeah, I need to just wait and work on those accounts that are higher value to me. I'm going to get paid more and it's better for the business. And now it starts to connect the dots for them. So that's what I would say on a compensation perspective. But Dave, I don't know if you have tackled that. Have you gotten that far yet to tackle that yet with within your org?
We have not, but those are great ideas.
Okay.
And hopefully, Siki, is that part of the toolkit? Because I want that article.
Yes, yes, that is part of the toolkit. So,
Very good.
yes, even though it talks about ICP, it is very directly
Yeah,
relatable
yeah.
to MQAs. All right, we still got questions coming in. Are you guys ready for a few more?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So, the shift towards MQA, can it be beneficial for companies exclusively targeting SMB accounts? Right, versus those that are targeting enterprise accounts, right? We know the buying committee is going to be bigger
Oh,
at enterprise accounts than at the smaller SMB accounts. So is it just as beneficial? What are your thoughts? Should everybody be making the move to MQA?
Dave, you have such a face like,
I'll let you answer that question first, and then I'll chime in.
yes, I think so. Unless, let me tell you this, the exception would be if you really just have one buyer, like in a really small company where you might just sell to the accountant, then yes. But once you have a buying group, and I think that's happening more and more now, you know, I think everyone needs to do it. I think it's easier though. Like, in fact, I think at Forrester 2 years ago, they had a large company and a small company. If your whole marketing and sales team can fit around the table, you can probably make that change in 90 days. If it's a large organization, this is where you're doing a 90-day pilot, a larger rollout. So I think everyone needs to do it. It's just how long it takes to implement.
Mm-hmm. It is an area we're going to investigate. And when I talked about, the 5 different pilot teams that we were considering, this was one of the key factors. Like if we work with a commercial team, are there enough people as part of the buying committee to really give us insights whether or not this works or not? So I do think there's value there. I don't have specific, data or anything that can prove that this thing has legs for the smaller type of companies. But I suspect, the things I talked about up front, the pressure on profitability, the pressure on the companies themselves, it's bringing in a bunch of different people in your decisions around buying. And it's whether or not it's a single person that's making a decision or just a handful of people, small group, I think that exists. I just see that trend happening across every size company, just a lot more scrutiny from different people.
Yeah. Every sale is a slog these days. I mean, that's been consistent term I've heard across our client base. I
Hmm.
think it is just more people. I mean, one of the things I did like one of Kerry Cunningham's research was talking about, let's say the average is 11, but in a small company, it could be just 3 or 4. Getting everyone in a meeting to make a decision, it's just like that can just take 3 weeks on calendars, and then if you get everyone to agree and then you want to change your mind, is it worth it to try to schedule those someone's on vacation there, it's just hard just internally to make a decision with so many people weighing in and things like that. So I think an MQA makes sense unless it really is you're selling to a small business, but your
You know, like,
buying committee could be smaller. Dave, for commercial, maybe it's 3 people, it's
Hmm.
not 10.
yeah, yeah. Awesome. All right, we have one last question. I
Okay.
can't believe we're getting through them all. Sometimes there's like the scramble, we can't get to them all, but this time I think we are. All right, so the last question. In the ideal state, how does an automation Marketo team prepare to support the shift to, they say an ABM motion, but I think it's an MQL, an account-based motion, from a technical and a personnel perspective?
Dave, that's your department because you
That is
run that.
sorry to put you on the spot, but I think
Yeah.
this one's for you.
And this is from
Well,
one of his employees.
I
That's
know
all we
it
got to do.
is. We started implementing, as I mentioned, a pilot program for ABM last year, and it was a big transition for not only the automation team, but also the analytics team. So, um, trying to uncover the ways to support this new model it's been a lot of work. And a lot of this stems from working very closely with that account-based marketing team in understanding the requirements to go actually drive some of the some of the changes in the systems. So Jonathan Smith on my team really has been tremendous in supporting our account-based transition in the systems. I think I will say that I depend on her and her knowledge of Salesforce and Marketo and all the different tools. So we use demand base, and that's been pretty critical in our ability to support more account-based interactions and demand generation. So her and her team have really kind of made a whole bunch of changes in how we utilize the system, new fields, new categories to support account-based, uh, I guess, qualification and tracking of engagement. So it did take a lot of work. And I think from, if you're on one of these teams and you are on my team, the biggest thing is just be open to thinking about ways to drive change. Just be open to testing and iterating around pilot programs and thinking of ways to support these bigger transitions. 100% leverage your peers externally that are going through similar processes to learn what they're doing, whether it's Marketo communities, marketing ops communities. There's a lot of people that know how to do these things very well. So I don't know. It's kind of a rambling answer to a lot of appreciation for my team that's here, but also a perspective of being open to driving these changes, knowing that these systems are not actually very helpful right now, the way they're designed.
Yeah.
So it's a tough job.
Awesome. I think that's a great note to end things on. So thank you, Dave. Thank you, Kathy. As always, thank you for sharing your insights, your real world experience, and all of that to today's discussion. So we're going to wrap things up here. So thank you to everybody for hanging in there. Everybody hung in the entire time. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for all the great questions. I will be sending out the follow-up email later today with the toolkit and some other resources to help you guys all make your own transition from MQL to MQA. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jessica.